Hello, welcome to Dev Radio. I'm here with Dima Maltsev from CH Robinson. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be on the show.
Thank you. And we've got you on the show because you're one of our Azure Developer Influencers. The Azure Developer Influencer program, we recognize people at customers who are real thought leaders within their organizations. And, you know, everyone says you're one of those people at CH Robinson that you can go to get an Azure question answered. And today you're going to talk a little bit about approach to storage for message-based architectures and kind of how you thought through some trade-offs when you had to make a decision recently for cost. Let's start off with tell us a little bit about CH Robinson and what you all do.
Yeah, definitely. Like you mentioned, I work for CH Robinson. We are one of the world's largest third-party logistics companies. We solve transportation and logistics problems for companies across the globe and across industries. So if you as a company have transportation needs or you're looking to optimize or manage freight, we at CH Robinson will provide solutions to those challenges. Said this, we have over 100,000 customers and over 96,000 carriers under the contract. So very large footprint, very large customer and carrier base.
Yeah. And what's going on is people have freight that needs to be moved, and you're matching them up with people that have capacity to move that freight
Correct.
in real time. Right.
That is one of the core functionalities or value proposition that we have at CH Robinson, but we can also manage the entire freight for companies. And we work with small as well as very large organizations. So we do that across, again, the globe and across small and large customers.
Cool. And Rick, welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. We're just getting started talking about CH Robinson and introduced the Developer Influencer program. So you need to keep track of all these messages, Dima.
That is correct, right? So given our footprint and how many carriers and customers we need to connect to, we can't do that all manually. So there is a big focus on automation and digital connectivity with our customers and carriers. And a lot of carriers and customers obviously integrate with us via digital means like API calls or old EDI connectivity with CH Robinson. So given that, we have a huge number of messages flowing back and forth between, again, CH Robinson and our carriers and customers.
Yeah. And you need to store all these messages.
Well, we need to do actually many different things for these messages, but one of the things that what we are going to be talking today about is we have a need to troubleshoot and provide visibility to our workflows to see what is happening when a customer sends a shipment request and what happens next, in order to, again, provide visibility and troubleshooting needs. Ultimately, it ends in our Navisphere platform where we execute on that shipment and we find the carrier and we ultimately satisfy the needs for that shipment. But as in the technology space, we also need to manage exception cases and visibility. And that's what we are going to be talking about today, how we solve that problem.
Yeah. And it wasn't so much a technical problem because you started off using Azure Storage.
Well, I mean, from the very beginning, it was a technical problem, right? So we are dealing with the very, very large number of messages a day, about 40 to 50 million messages a day that we are dealing with on a daily basis. So it is a technical problem. And what we started with is that, hey, okay, so for us to provide visibility to those messages and provide like what transformation those messages might have taken and how they end up in our Navisphere platform, we wanted to save these messages as they go through our pipelines, again, for the visibility problem. And in working with Microsoft, we chose to use blob storage account as the intermediary, as the way to save those messages. That's what we started with. Now, as we went live and as we went with this implementation, we quickly figured out that the cost of using the storage account, like the general purpose V2 blob storage account, all of a sudden is very high. And it's not what we expected from the original cost estimate that we put together with Microsoft. One of the reasons that we figured out it was high is not because of the space or the size of the storage account. The size of the storage account actually was not that large. It's about just a few terabytes in size. And that type of a storage account or that size of a storage account is relatively cheap from Microsoft Azure perspective. However, what really got us was the number of API calls that we make to save those messages in the storage account. Just imagine every time the message comes in and we need to preserve that for visibility or troubleshooting, we need to make a call to using the storage SDK to the storage account. And it turns out that for every 10,000 messages, you pay like a penny, a fraction of a penny. It's really, really small cost. But because we have millions, hundreds of millions of calls a day, that actually was quite an expensive thing from the cost perspective.
Yeah. And so what did you do next? How'd you?
Yeah. So obviously from my background is in architecture, right? So I have a background in engineering and architecture design. I'm a manager now in the digital connectivity space at C.H. Robinson.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to mention is that from the architecture perspective, the technology and the technical aspect of it is just one side of it. The cost is also very important consideration when you design or architect a solution.
Yeah.
So we looked at what we have and said, okay, how can we optimize our solution from the cost perspective? Is there a win or is there like a way to minimize that cost? And just so you know, it's just the storage account is just one part of our solution. We have other things that we put in place, like Event Hub and ADX and Azure Functions. But the storage account was by far the biggest chunk of a cost of a solution. So we looked at, hey, what can we do to optimize the cost? And really, I want kind of to give a shout out to the team because it's like you mentioned, I'm an expert in Azure. Yeah, I know a few things about Azure, but it's really the team, it's the technology at C.H. Robinson that makes the difference.
Yeah.
That's why I love to, working at C.H. Robinson and really recommend everybody to check that out. So
it's fun to work with smart people.
Yeah, so we have a very talented, smart group of people on the digital connectivity space and just across C.H. Robinson. So it's really fun place to work at from a technology perspective.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what we've done as a group, right? So we looked at, okay, what can we do? And one obvious thing we looked at was a different type of a storage account, which is a file share storage account, not like a general purpose V2, but it's the kind is the file share, but then or the file storage, and the performance would be the premium tier performance of the account. And it is kind of maybe counterintuitive because you would think that, well, that storage account might be even more expensive because, hey, you bumping up your performance tier to the premium, you actually using this specific storage account, which is the file storage account, not just a general V2 purpose. But what turns out is the pricing model is slightly different. And from a pricing model, the premium file storage account is based on the reserve capacity. What you are paying for is, hey, I need 5 terabytes of space. and then there is a flat fee that you would be paying for reserving 5 terabyte of space, whether you use it or not. But what you would not be paying for is individual API calls that we make so many of them on daily basis that bumped our cost for the other type of a storage account. So we looked at that. We looked at the Azure cost estimator tool. We worked with Microsoft very closely here in Minneapolis, and actually we even reached out to the product group. And through all these conversations, the decision was, okay, let's try it out and see if it works. So the team went through some POC phase to put it all together, to see if we actually going to be saving some money on switching from the blob storage account to the file storage with the premium tier. And actually, it all checked out, and we were able to save actually a significant part of the cost. I'm not going to go into the number of details, but from the percentage perspective, it was 90% of savings.
That counts. That's
so that's like that was really surprising, and that's a lot.
You mentioned there were a few kind of gotchas that you had to watch out for when you went down this path. What did you learn?
So let me maybe first describe a few considerations that we had and the differences between the storage account, like the blob storage account, and the file share account that made a difference for us, because our use case may be a little bit unique, and it's not for every, I'm not saying that file storage account is going to be always cheaper than the blob storage account. It is specific to our use case. And to understand our use case, I'll go back to to our digital connectivity space and how many messages and transactions we need to pass through our space. This counts in billions over the course of a few months. But every single message is fairly small. It's about, on average, it's about 1 kilobyte in size. So again, we have a lot of messages, but very small messages that we need to preserve for some time and then retrieve them when we need to have visibility or troubleshoot those messages. So that's our use case. Now, with this use case, what we had to look at as when we were choosing the file storage type, what we need to be aware of is again, like I mentioned, capacity. But what capacity does, it's not just reserving you 5 terabyte or 10 terabyte. It also limits you from the throughput and IOPS perspective. That is very important because there is a limit, and if you go over that limit, then your SDK calls or API calls would start getting back HTTP code 429, which means it would be throttling your calls, and you would not be able to put more messages or save more files in a storage account. So that is one thing that you really need to be aware of if you're going down this path. So again, that we validated that piece on our side. It all checked out. We were well under the limit for the provisioned capacity, but I want to make sure that people who are listening to this call are aware of this thing or consideration. And again, just to repeat, a ton of small files, very tiny files is our use case. For instance, if you have to store, I don't know, video files, most likely the blob storage account is going to be much less expensive than the file share. So as far as the gotchas, right? So these are the other things to be aware of, which we really did not know about before we went with the storage account or with the file storage account, but luckily everything checked out for us just fine. So one of the maybe important gotchas for people to know is the premium file share type of a storage account does not support Azure region redundancy. So you would not be able to have GRS or GZRS type of an account with the file share. What it means that if you deploy to the, central US, there would be no way to replicate that data through Azure means to East US too. You could use other tools like the file sync and a few other ways to actually get to that point, but it would not be part of the storage account like it is with the normal blob storage account. So you lose Azure region redundancy if you go with the file shares. But really, I actually checked just recently to see what if you go with the LRS, which is the local redundant storage account type, what percent, what durability, like how much you get, how many nines you get from the durability perspective. So on an official Azure page, it is 11 nines. So even with the LRS account, you get 11 nines for the durability, which is plenty in our case.
Yeah.
And even with LRS, right, you get at least 3 copies of your files stored. So if one copy gets lost, you still have two copies to get to that file.
Yeah.
So that is one very important thing to be aware of. So if your use case requires Azure region redundancy, then you may want to go with something else.
Yeah.
Another thing that I mentioned, hey, we have a ton of files that we store. Well, we don't store them for infinity, right? So we only store them for X amount of months. I think it's like 95 days. And with the blob storage account, there is an easy way to delete old files, which is called Lifecycle Management. It's just part of the storage account. You enable the Lifecycle Management, and you don't need to worry about this going forward. Like anything that is older, whatever, like say 30 days can be deleted, whatever your setting is. With the file shares, you don't get it out of the box. So you have to provide your own solution to delete files, to purge old files from the file share. Yeah. So it's a little work on our side. The team was able to put quickly a solution for this, like a very simple timer-based Azure function that just deletes old files on like every day.
Yeah.
So kind of a small gotcha just to be aware of, but nothing serious.
A problem you can solve with a little extra software.
Yeah, just given how like 90% in cost reduction, like a couple days of work to solve this problem is just you get it back right away. Another gotcha again is to be aware of is if you use SDK for the file shares, like the file share SDK, it limits how big the size of the file that you can upload in one chunk. So the limit is 4 megabytes. So you need to be aware of. There is a way to chunk the file and then upload even larger files to the file share through SDK, but that would be a little bit of work to do. Not a big deal. Again, you can definitely do 10 megabyte and 100 megabyte files. You just need to be chunking them up versus just doing one API call.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the, again, maybe it's not the biggest, but one of the other things that got us was a way, how do we authenticate and authorize calls against the storage account with the blob. So in our setup, we have an Azure function that makes calls to the blob storage account and to the file share account. With the blob storage account, you could use the Azure function managed identity to limit what that function can or cannot do with the storage account. Like you can just be a reader, or you can be a contributor, or you could be a writer. So that's how we managed the access from Azure function to our storage account. Is we used Azure function managed identity to call the storage account. With the file share account, that is not supported. So there are other ways to obviously authorize and authenticate your call. Like you could use storage keys, you can use SAS tokens. But again, just to be aware or know that the managed identity is not is not
Okay.
supported out of the box.
Great call out. Authentication and identity are a part of every solution, and they'll show up. Yeah, that was I really like that story. I like that. Azure is very flexible, and if you want to do something, there's probably 6 or 7 ways to figure it out. But just the thought process that your team went through in the solution you landed on is just a great story. So thanks a ton for your time, and would love to have you back on again. And in the meantime, good luck at CH Robinson.
So. Oh yeah, I really appreciate the time. It was fun. Thank you for having me on the show.
Cool. Take care.
Bye.